I remember I went home and told my dad that these two Mormons were in my Bible study at school, and he was not having that. He was like, Mormons are going to hell.
Oh, wow. Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah, I remember we did not, I would say we did not necessarily get along too well. You're like really into like Christian rock. And I remember, I don't know, it sounds right. A funny thing, I had a crush on you though in high school. I remember that, and remember just being like, God, what did Rob Davis, what a fucking jerk. But I just like think it's really funny that now, like years later, we're like both these like tattooed hippy dippy like liberal goons. I guess it's interesting to me, like so I guess explain a little bit, because not everybody who watches this knows you, how I guess Christian you were in high school, like what your experience with faith was then. Maybe go into a little bit about like your family and just like the way that you practiced your faith then.
So I grew up in the charismatic, like Pentecostal movement. So that was really like my childhood was, we were in church 3 or 4 days a week, all kinds of stuff, revivals and all the speaking in tongues. And
I was going to say, Pentecostal is like
that.
the gifts of the Pentecost, so
Yeah.
that's like speaking in tongues.
It was
and
intense.
Yeah.
So that was really my background, and then, got involved in bands, starting in like junior high, started skateboarding and all that stuff. But they were all Christian bands, and
Right.
was going to shows all the time, and really involved in all of that. In high school, I think I kind of prided myself on being like the good Christian kid,
Yeah.
but I was also like way into like punk rock and hardcore and metal, and then my girlfriend got pregnant. So that changed everything.
How did that happen? How did that happen?
So that was my, that was my senior year. First semester, she got pregnant. Second semester, I came back married. She was a junior, so.
I did not know that.
So yeah, I spent the second half of my senior year as the married guy, but I was also still kind of like the Christian guy, so that's an interesting juxtaposition. And really my relationship with Christianity kind of went up the next few years after that. I became a pastor and a worship pastor and a youth pastor and all that stuff.
In that like kind of charismatic.
Yeah.
Like okay, yeah.
And then got a job out here in North Carolina. I was like an important person in that world, and ended up hating it all and walking away, and I haven't been back since, and that's been about 5 years. So.
Yeah. Well, I just want to it's interesting to me because when I knew you in let's say like when I knew you in high school, I knew I was gay, but I wasn't out. But I definitely knew that you were not okay. I mean, I knew that your faith, the way that you practice Christianity, it was not okay with that. It was not welcome. And so I guess it's fascinating to me, like, God, how many years later is it now? Like,
almost 20?
Almost 20 years later. Almost 20 years later to see you be like the person that's out there that's like a champion for gay marriage rights or equal rights for transgender youths or whatever. I don't know, it's really fascinating. So I guess I wanted to meet with you because I'm wondering, like, how did you get from there to here?
Yeah, not really. And I'm sure a lot of people would say this that are kind of in kind of a conservative religious world, that it's just not something they think about. It's not something they care about. They will say they don't know anybody, although they do. they just aren't aware of it. So, I would have said that probably for years. That, like, oh, I just don't, it's not something I'm worried about. I probably would have never been the guy to be like, being gay is wrong. I just wouldn't have thought about it. So, I went through a long period where that was just kind of the world I lived in, the fish doesn't know that it's in water kind of thing, like this is the culture that I'm in. So until, and I'm not gonna out someone, but until really having someone very close to me question their sexuality and come to me with that question, and then it was like, fuck this, like, no, like then you start thinking like, oh, that person said this and this group thinks this, and I'm like, yeah, fuck all those people. Like,
when that happened, were you in a pastoral? I mean, were you their pastor, or was that a friend or like a congregant, like a?
So that it happened shortly after kind of walking away from the church, and then I really think that changed everything.
Okay, rolling.
Yeah, so I think most people, like, not the Trump, I have a gay friend or a black friend thing, but actually being confronted with, like, oh, these are real people. Like, it's not just this theory or this belief or this idea, but it's like, no, this is someone's life. Like, until you are really confronted with that, I really think a lot of people are not going to care, or worse.
Yeah. So you think a lot of people are really, it's not even that they are anti-gay, it's that they actually don't even confront the issue because they don't know, they don't think they know anybody that's gay?
I think so, because the last church that I worked for, the topic randomly would come up and be like, well, this person might be gay, or this person is questioning things, and yeah, the responses and reactions were so like, oh, like, okay, whatever. Like, they just didn't even want to address it. Like, it wasn't a real thing. And I think a lot, even the people who, will vote for anti-gay things, anti-trans things, I don't think they're consciously anti those things. I think it's the whole MLK thing of like, you remember like the words of the silence of your friends is louder than the words of your enemies. Like they don't realize it, even though it's still shitty. Like,
no, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. So how did you? If you don't mind talking about it, what precipitated your kind of break with the church, with like that kind of charismatic evangelical kind of church, and where where do you fit yourself on a religious or spiritual spectrum now?
Definitely think it was a number of things, but I've always been, as far back as I remember, a very introspective, like thoughtful person, and so I've read very widely, and it was like the more things I was exposed to, the more I questioned things. And the last church I worked for, like they called me like the theologian in residence because I was the theology guy. Like I knew about all this historical and whatever crap that bunch of useless information that I have no functional purpose for now. But yeah, I mean, it is totally like people say, like, slippery slope. But if you're a thoughtful person, it's true. Like, you go down that rabbit trail, you're probably not going to go back. Now.
So what religions
yeah.
have to do is just stop people from thinking, essentially?
Yes.
If you want to keep people in the fold, if you want to keep people in the faith, you just have to stop them from thinking.
Right.
That's basically what you're saying.
Don't ask questions. Don't, just go with the flow. And, a lot of people are that way, and they're fine with it.
Yeah.
And, I went through a phase of Richard Dawkins is my hero, and that whole thing. I went through that years ago, but I think now I'm like religion can be this really beneficial thing to a lot of people, spirituality, whatever it is. But there are toxic forms of it, and there are beneficial forms of it. And sometimes I use the phrase like there's benign religion and there's malignant religion. It could be this really bad thing, or it could be I just show up to a building once a week and I hang out with my friends, and
Sure.
So I'm not the hardcore anti-theist guy anymore.
Right. Do you consider yourself atheist? That was a sign from God. So. Be careful. Careful how you answer.
Depending on how it's defined, I would call myself an atheist. Much more likely to say agnostic. I don't know. But humanist, maybe.
I consider myself a humanist.
If atheism means that you have found no personal, compelling evidence for any of the millions of gods that people have created to exist, then yes, I'm an atheist. But that's not what most people mean by that word.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think humanist is, it's kind of how I feel. I mean, it's because there's still something compelling about the human spirit, but I don't think of it in the human spirit in the same way that other people talk about the human spirit, and I don't feel spiritual at all. I don't feel spiritual, but I believe in humans. I believe in our collective good, essentially. I believe there are things that are transcendent. I believe there are pieces of music. I believe there are pieces of art that transcend a basic human understanding. Do I think we can learn about them and try to find out about them in scientific ways and kind of investigate them in a very human way? Yes, absolutely. Do I think, because I don't think that is God, but it's it's not. It's a belief in something, at least. It's a belief in the collective humanity for some good.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that, and then I watch the news, and I'm like, I don't believe in humanity at all. Humanity is the worst. Humanity is the worst.
No, it's great because you can from that perspective you can see, churches and synagogues and mosques, they are doing good things. They are bringing good out of people. They are also doing some fucked up shit.
Yeah.
But it allows us to be honest and just be okay, it can take this person and turn them left, or it can turn them right.
Yeah. So Rob, you have 2 children now. How do you approach who are in their teens? How do you approach the question of spirituality and religion with them?
It's really interesting because when they were really young, I spent a lot of time talking about God and Jesus and the Bible and how old is the earth and all that stuff. And then I left the church when they were 8 and 9. So at that point I became this hardcore atheist and almost fundamentalist atheist. And so their only understanding of religion came from that perspective, because it's really this pivotal time in a child's life. And so now, I think they would probably both call themselves atheists, which is interesting, being, in school in this southern, pretty racist town that they go to school in, and just being like, yeah, I'm an atheist, like, whatever.
Do kids talk about them? I mean, like, has that caused problems?
It caused problems. They got bullied in middle school, both of them. I have not heard about any problems in high school. So I'm assuming there's probably a lot of kids that are like rejecting the Confederacy and everything else that goes along with it in their school. But yeah, I don't feel like we talk about it hardly ever. Like it's just, it's like a non-topic.
Yeah. It's just really interesting to me to think like about our kids, how they get, they grow up with our legacy, right? Like the legacy that we kind of like leave them. I mean, I say we, I don't have kids, but, like your parents growing up in a charismatic community of, believers in Christ was obviously a formative thing for you. I mean, it was a formative part of your life. And then you can see firsthand how that switch, how that change, like, which happened to you while your kids were of an age, that was really susceptible to, like, what do my parents believe? Because what my parents believe is what I believe. That's just an interesting relationship to me.
Yeah, and I really, like if I think back, like, what did I teach my kids when they were young that I'm most proud of and also becomes a pain in our asses is critical thinking. Because it's like I taught them to question even when I was a pastor. Like, question everything. Like, ask questions, doubt everything. Like, don't just accept, like, somebody told you something so it's true. Like, I remember saying that when they were 5 years old. And so now, the tiniest, most meaningless thing becomes a debate in our house. So
question everything. Like, no, don't question why I said you can't have the car. That's not what I meant when I said question everything.
So it's a blessing and a curse, I guess.
Nice. Nice.